Back by popular demand, and it's fine with me, Tatyova, Benthic, Druid, and Jace, Vryn's Prodigy. We're going to keep this because we have 2 lands in hand, including a Lotus Cobra. Yeah, so Tatyova doing quite well on the channel, and like I say, it's fine with me because I love playing Tatyova. Exactly my kind of card. Playing lands and drawing cards for free is superb. What is not superb is getting out of Vryn's Prodigy on turn 1 with your mana crypt that doesn't have any artwork. That's just rude. We'll go for a breeding pool here and get out the Lotus Cobra and hope that we draw into a land next turn. Lotus Cobra has landfall, and whenever a land enters under your control you can add 1 mana of any colour to your mana pool, so it's a very underrated mana dork in my opinion, especially if you play fetch lands, things like that. Always going to yield to the mana crypt trigger. But yeah, Jace, Vryn's Prodigy, very powerful card, as are most Jace cards. I don't know why Wizards of the Coast has such a hard time making Jace cards that are only okay. It's tap, draw a card and discard a card. If there are 5 or more cards in your graveyard, exile Jace, Vryn's Prodigy and return it to the battlefield as a Planeswalker. It's got 5 loyalty when it flips, which is already good, and then it has a +1 up to 1 target creature gets -2, -0 till the end of turn. -3 is Snapcaster Mage, effectively. -9 is you gain an emblem. Whenever you cast a spell, target opponent puts the top 5 cards of the library into their graveyard. We draw into a land, so we can actually go for an Explosive Veggies here, which will then put us into a Lightning Greaves, so we'll just have to hope that our opponent doesn't screw us by countering this, which is not beyond the realms, but they do not, so that is excellent. And then when we get these 2 lands into play, we'll be able to add 2 mana. And like I said, Lotus Cobra, very, very good. And then I always have to remember what this does. Gain control of creature, power less than equal. Right, so we'll see if our opponent wants to try and get the Lotus Cobra off of us with the Vidalcan Shackles. They don't even attempt it. So that is fine with me. Looks like they were F6'd, so I don't know if they... yeah, I'm not sure if they should have been there, to be honest. We'll swing in just for the sake of getting in 2 free damage there. And pass it over to our opponent, who is going to get bolted again off the Mana Crypt. There we go. Forced Magic Online into doing exactly as I said, and getting to another land here, so... the opponent's probably sat back on counter magic, so... might not be the best line of play, but it's about all we've got going on, so try and get down our commander here before we play the land. Alright, and maybe it looks like our opponent does not have counter magic in hand. We will always yield to the Tatyova. And we will add... yeah, it doesn't actually matter, we can't do anything. Yeah, I'm just contemplating whether we gush or not. I don't think we do. And I think we'll let our opponent take the Lotus Cobra if they want it. Oh, they can actually... yeah, I didn't realise they played another island, so they can actually take... yeah, good job we drew into that Rex Sage. Yeah, they can take Tatyova, so they'll probably get a card draw from that. Luckily we didn't swing in with the Lotus Cobra so that they could do that in retaliation. Yeah, so not the worst thing that could have happened. We do have Reclamation Sage to get rid of the Vidalcan Shackles. I hope that our opponent doesn't have counter magic. You can just assume that... oh, and they're tapping out the blue mana, so that is fine. Oh, they get an extra turn after this one. Fun times. So, next turn, we're going to see a flipped Jace. I think sorcery, sorcery. Yeah, and how many types do they need? Oh, they need 5. Right, okay, I thought it was 4. And then I saw that there were 2 sorceries, so... Yeah, not quite there yet. Although it is imminent. We may well even see another extra turn card here, because it's the type of thing Blue loves to do, is play Magic by themselves. I've actually been thinking of making a... It won't be anytime soon, because Return to Ravnica is coming out soon. Just checking out the spoilers for those every day currently. And yeah, anyway, what I was going to say is that I've been looking at making a mono-blue wizard tribal deck for a little while, of which Jace, Vryn's Prodigy would be in that deck. But I don't know if I really like the idea of just depressing your opponent to the point where you're just countering absolutely everything they do. I might build it and see if I enjoy playing that or not. And more importantly, see if everyone enjoys seeing me play that. But yeah, before that, I'm going to be playing cards from the, what's it called, Guilds of Ravnica set that will be coming out soon. A couple of commanders in there that I'm really looking forward to building. Alright, and we can go for a Rec Sage here. I will pretend to have up counter magic. Go for a Rec Sage, and worst case scenario we can get it back with the Ewit and try again next turn. Yeah, our opponent mana drains that, so that's 3 extra mana for our opponent next turn. We'll go for the Ewit on the Rec Sage and try again next turn, because we do want to get rid of that Vedalken Shackles. Yes, we do want to use that. We will pass the turn over to our opponent. Yeah, so what you typically want to do in this Tatyova deck is get Tatyova on the field and protect her, which we attempted to do with the Lightning Greaves, but obviously that didn't work out thanks to the Vedalken Shackles. Our opponent is now gaining the card advantage on our behalf, which is very kind of them, but we just want to do what Simic does, is ramp and play out big spells. But the great thing about Tatyova is that you get rewarded for the ramping as well. So the thing that you would do to get the spells and get the card advantage, you're actually getting the card advantage for the ramp itself. So it's a very unique card in that instance. Something like Azusa, where you just play out boatloads of lands, you don't actually get anything for playing the lands other than the chance of playing something that you might draw into, or you might already have in hand. So Tatyova is quite unique in that regard, and that's why I really like her. She's rewarding you for something that you would be doing anyway, and my absolute most hated Planeswalker in existence is Teferi Temporal Archmage. I think our opponent just took over the game, if they hadn't taken over the game already. They now want to see what cards we have in hand. Probably shouldn't have F6, but I didn't want to Pact Negation and take off another turn, because we just need to get that Reclamation Sage out. Possibly a mistake, but yeah, I really didn't want to get the Pact Negation down, and I don't think countering something like Future Sight or Teferi would have changed this game any, because it's mono blue and they specialise in playing solitaire magic anyway. But we'll play out this game just to show everyone what Jace, Vryn's Prodigy does. This is typical of what Jace, Vryn's Prodigy does. They just played out the turnabout, which is you choose artifact, creature or land, tap all untap permanents of the chosen type that a target player controls, or untap all the target permanents that you choose, that you chose of your type. I think they chose to untap all their lands. Yeah, I'm not sure what they... Oh, and they're just bouncing all our... Okay. Yeah, so fun times. Just bouncing all our lands back to our hand. I am going to keep playing this just to see if our opponent actually has a win condition other than trying to encourage us to scoop. Let's see if we can get anything here. We can get the Lightning Greaves back into play. Actually, we can go for the Reclamation Sage on the Vedalken Shackles. So if we get out the Breeding Pool, shock that in, say yes to that and get another green source. And then get out the Rex Sage and always yield to the Rhystic Study. I didn't even realise they played a Rhystic Study because I kind of given up on this game, but I do like to try and laugh in the face of adversity sometimes and see if I can get anywhere close to doing something about our opponent here. Because that type of thing is just fun to me. We will swing in at Teferi, I think. Try and get rid of Teferi and hope our opponent doesn't have an unsummon effect. They do not, so that is excellent. We will discard Forest, and Island. We have Crucible of Worlds in hand. So if we got into something like an Azusa here, or something that means we can play multiple lands in a turn, I don't know how much it would help us because our opponent's going to have so much card advantage on us. That Force Spike is really going to hurt on top of our opponent's library. Counter a spell unless the opponent pays one. They just bounced. With Repeal, return, yeah, they just bounced the Lotus Cobra. They've now bounced our Commander. So yeah, that's clearly the tactic of this deck, is to bounce all your opponent's lands and then bounce their creatures back so they can't actually play them. We'll go for the Lotus Cobra here and expect it to get countered. And we'll give our opponent the counter spell that's in their hand because we can't do anything other than that. And our opponent does Force Spike the Lotus Cobra, which is to be expected. Yeah, make no bones about it, this game is won by our opponent, but I just want to see if they actually have a win condition other than, as I've already said, I think I've already said that I don't think they have a win condition other than just forcing us to scoop, or lightly encouraging us to scoop, I should say. Opponent does have Effective Fiction for even more card advantage. We will give them either Cyclonic Rift or a boatload of lands and a Disdainful Stroke. Pick one. Probably go for the Disdainful Stroke, to be honest, because yeah, they went for the Cyclonic Rift. Probably go for the Disdainful Stroke myself so that I can counter Tatyova, because they know that that's in our hand. Do we go for... I think we just go for Lightning Greaves here, to be honest. And this time we will pay for the Rhystic Study. Yeah, Crucible of Worlds won't do anything for us for at least a couple of turns. Counter-spelling the Lightning Greaves. We'll go at Jace again. I'm very much enjoying the fact that our opponent doesn't want to tap Ancient Tomb anymore because they've taken themselves down to... Oh, they've played the Mana Crypt though, which I didn't see either. Our opponent might just die to their own Mana Crypt. I'm sure they'll draw into bounce spells where they can bounce their Mana Crypt back to their hand, but that would be... Ooh, losing life again from something. No. Maybe they tapped down their Ancient Tomb there. They lost life and then regained it there, so I'm not sure what effect they were playing there. And there is a High Tide on the top of our opponent's library, so that is not... That's not good for us. That means that they'll have 12... Well, let me count that out in a second. That means they'll have 12, 13, 14, 15, minus the 1 blue mana. Oh, 15, 16, 17, so 16 minus the blue mana. So they'll have a lot of mana, is what I'm trying to say. See if we can kill Jace here. We managed to do that, so excellent. Our opponent, you know, just proof that not giving up can really pay dividends sometimes. I'm being quite vain here and hoping that our opponent dies to their own Mana Crypt trigger. A couple of bolts in a row should do it. Don't think it'll happen because, yeah, I mean, our opponent can even fish out with a Mystical Tutor, a bounce spell to get rid of the mana crypt from their own hand. But curious to see if they're actually going to do something to win this game, like play out a bomb of some kind. Blue does have things like Leviathans and Octopus and Krakens, things like that they can play in the late game, but more curious than anything to see what our opponent actually wants to do with all that mana that they can produce. And we will go into... We could try and get down Tatyova. Could try and get down Tatyova, which will go straight into a counter spell. Most likely. But then we can Pact of Negation that, but then we're at risk of them blowing up one of our lands and we just lose next turn, so yeah, we don't run into a counterspell with that, so we'll swing into our opponent and force them, not necessarily force them to block with the Jace, but I think they would. Okay, Snapcaster Mage into I don't know what. I don't actually mind losing either of these two creatures, so if they just chump block with the Snapcaster, opponent going for a repeal, we'll probably just bounce Tatyova back to our hand. And this is what I mean, this is just dirtling around and not actually progressing the game any, so I'm not really sure how our opponent wins. Repeal, repeal on the mana crypt. Do I want to Pact of Negation that? That is really risky because if our opponent can blow up and they can actually counter it with... can they play... Yeah, they can actually counter our Pact of Negation, but do I want to force them to do that? Oh, it's risky. I think... Yeah, I'm going to regret it. I've written myself out of this game already, so if I lose with a Pact of Negation trigger, then so be it. For those of you who don't know, it counters a spell for 0 mana, but at the beginning of the next upkeep, or the beginning of my next upkeep, I have to pay 5 for it, or I lose the game. So if our opponent blows up one of our lands here, then we are done, because we can't pay the 5 mana. We can't play lands at instant speed. Our opponent can, by all means, counter the Pact of Negation, but I would love to see our opponent not be able to get Mana Crypt off the field and then die to a bolt from it. Almost forces them to chump with both these two, because if one of these creatures gets through and then they get bolted next turn, they actually lose. This is a more interesting game than I thought it was going to turn out to be. Sometimes... What on earth was that? That was a bounce spell of some... Ah, the Cyclonic Rift. Alright, yeah, so our opponent keeping around Jace, Vryn's Prodigy. They can flip that next turn. I'm now going for a Mystical Tutor. See what they go for here. I don't think there's any like blue land destruction that they could fish for here. If there is, I'll certainly learn something, so it's not as if the game is completely lost, completely useless to us. And I actually think that this game's turned out to be quite interesting. Alright, gone for a Serum Visions. So maybe they are just going to use the Serum Visions to scry 2 cards to the bottom and fish for a Wasteland. Got a Remove Soul, so this is really just counter heavy. Jace has been flipped. There's an Ugin, the Spirit Dragon, on top of the library. 5 cards in hand for our opponent. I don't know if they've played the High Tide yet. Oh, they did play the High Tide. And I am F6ing through the turn because I should probably pay more attention to what our opponent's doing, but I think that they are just so far ahead, they can do so much. I don't want to drag the game out for any longer than it needs to be dragged out. Our opponent bolts Taser with Ugin. And then Serum Visions. Scrying. Did they tell us what it did with the scry? Puts 2 cards on the bottom, so I think they were looking for a wasteland there. Doesn't look like they got into that. Oh, and then bouncing the lands. So there we go. Excellent. So it looks like, I mean, we were dead anyway then, so that Pact of Negation didn't actually do anything for us. It's a shame that, because they wouldn't have died to the Mana Crypt trigger anyway, because it would have been bounced back to their hand. We could have tried to carry on playing it out and get damage through with Rex Sage or something from Chord of Calling, but I don't think that was all that feasible. I think we had to try and have them die to their own Mana Crypt trigger. But yeah, good game to our opponent. We lose to our own at Pact of Negation. We cannot pay for that. And we lose the game. Yeah, so turns out they do have some kind of win condition, get out big things like Ugin the Spirit Dragon, maybe some big creatures. They still have half the deck left, so I'm sure they have lots of other win conditions in there. But hopefully we gave our opponent a good game where they actually get to play their mono blue oppressive deck. I'm sure lots of people scoop to me in games where the deck hasn't been doing anything particularly abhorrent to them. So a deck like a mono blue deck that doesn't actually let you play magic and mass bounces your lands, I'm sure people scoop to that in a heartbeat. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed that game. It was incredibly oppressive, but it shows you what mono blue can do at the very least. I'm tribalkai on the EDH channel. Thank you for watching.